Wasabi guys, Void here, coming back at you all with another video. Now you might have heard about the current state of Standard, a ton of bannings. I believe 4 cards have been banned. However, if we were to do a year in review, including all the bannings from last year, close to 9 cards have been banned. I'm not entirely sure, I could be wrong about that. We had a card from Oath of the Gatewatch, we had a card from Eldritch Moon, we had a couple cards from Kaladesh, and we had the 4 recently banned cards, all of which have shaped what we know as Standard. Many people have been complaining for the past few months, Teamer Energy is just too versatile of a deck, it needs to be shut down, it needs to be banned. They took it a step further, and they decided to ban a couple cards from another deck, Ramunap Red. The namesake card, Ramunap Ruins, and Rampaging Ferocidon, which honestly isn't a huge piece of the deck, but it's very good against tokens, it's very good against your opponent's decks. Every point of damage matters to that deck, so it's very important having a card like that, especially if you could put more in from your sideboard. Definitely makes sense to throw it into that deck. Very good, 3/3 with Menace, difficult to block. However, was it at all necessary to go this hard with the Banhammer? Probably not. Now obviously Energy, the mechanic, was a huge mistake. Very few cards just didn't seem busted. Rogue Refiner got banned. Attune with Aether got banned. Some people think that Longtusk Cub could have been banned as well, but you just have this ridiculousness with a 3-color deck that is capable of splashing black in order to play the Scarab God and just dominate so many games in so many different ways. I can understand it was a huge mistake making the energy mechanic in the first place. It's so hard. How do you side against it? It's not like your artifact decks where all you have to do is side in some artifact hate, which is what you would expect from an artifact block such as Kaladesh, but that just wasn't the case. You just had so many cards that worked out really well that weren't even artifacts. You had, for the most part, creatures, good consistency creatures that worked incredibly well with the mechanic. So I know what you're saying right now. Get to the point, Void. You might have noticed, if you've ever visited your local game stores, you might have noticed before pre-release, I know I sure did, there is a huge increase in the amount of Commander players. Now, I'm not saying there's direct evidence here to suggest that more and more people are leaving Standard and coming to the format, but it certainly seems like that's the case, and it will only increase if Standard continues to be this ban-happy format, not unlike another card game that I know very well that also likes to manipulate cards, neutering certain decks and making it more capable for other decks to become playable, conveniently allowing yourself to make more money off of those players. Especially in the pro scene, you can make a lot of money. But the fact is, they just don't want people to play with the same decks, and I can understand that. If you want people to watch Grand Prix, or they want to be entertained, they want to watch a variety of different decks, and that's perfectly fine. But look at Commander, where there really isn't one commander that stands out in front of all of them. There really isn't even a few commanders that stand out well in front of all the others. It is just a cluster of all these different options, and it is quite fantastic. This might be sounding like a commercial at this point, but if you haven't played Commander yet, what are you waiting for? There really is no deterrent that I can think of, compared to Standard at least, why you wouldn't want to play this format. Even collect some of the cards, it's eternally playable. So you have older cards. If you're a Legacy player, you might enjoy it for that aspect, that a lot of those cards from Legacy can also see play in Commander. But even if you are a Standard player, I can understand it's not super competitive. There isn't this sense of planned obsolescence with a 2-year rotation or a 1.5-year rotation or whatever confusing thing they've done now. But instead, you get the challenge of experimenting with new legendary creatures. You get the challenge of just experimenting with all different types of decks. And it just all forms together in what is quite possibly the most fun deck building experience that Magic the Gathering has to offer. It's such a personal thing. It might seem incredibly intimidating at first, but you really appreciate once you've completed your first 100 card deck with your commander, all the effort that you put into it, the money that you put into it, if you put a lot of it into it or just a little bit, you still appreciate it, you still love it nevertheless. With Standard, you have problems with net decking, you have problems with a lack of diversity in the format, you see a lot of the same decks, and competitive play, while at times can be quite entertaining, tends to get boring after a while when you see the same decks dominate. So, while incredibly necessary, some bannings might be, the fact that you have to ban cards at all is a huge deterrent for the format in the first place, which is why, again, if you are a Standard player and you are contemplating leaving that format, please consider the next time you're at your local game store and you see a bunch of guys or gals with 100 card decks and you're looking, oh my gosh, that's a very inconsistent deck, you should be playing the minimum of 60 cards, what are you doing? They are having fun playing Elder Dragon Highlanders, or Commander, as it is now branded. Go up to them, ask them what the heck they're doing, how you can get started, because it is enjoyable, to say the least. And we don't really have these ban problems. Believe it or not, the last ban announcement was just a couple days ago, as of the making of this video. There are no bans to start off this year. There are no rule changes. The most drastic change that has happened in the last year for this format wasn't even that big of a change. It wasn't even that big of a surprise. It was just a month's worth of time spent on an experiment deciding whether or not silver bordered cards were going to be enjoyable in Commander. And it was for a little bit, but we knew it was going to come to an end. It wasn't something that was going to just ruin so many casual play groups. It wasn't something that was going to ruin your local game store if they run events for Commander. How many people are going to be playing these ridiculous cards? They didn't want it to completely change and just warp the format, but they wanted just to see what people were thinking about it. That's all it was. It was just a little experiment for about a month. And that was it. It was gone. It's gone now. That was the biggest change. The last time we had a ban was around spring of 2017 when Leovold was actually taking over the format a little bit. Quite a pain, reasonable to understand why they wanted to get rid of him. Wasn't even because he was incredibly powerful. It was because games could last hours and players, multiple different players at the table could be locked down with something like a Teferi's puzzle box, keeping everyone's hands empty, making it so that even if they do top deck something, you're the control player at the table and you have a way to counter them. That was it. Perfectly understandable. People were actually happy when that ban happened. Now also the same time they decided to unban Protean Hulk, which some people have their complaints about that card, but really it hasn't destroyed the format. Much like they anticipated, it really didn't impact the game any more than a lot of other cards that are used for combo potential. We have a lot of busted cards in the format. It might seem a bit arbitrary to decide, where do we draw that line in the sand, which card is extremely busted. You have people that complain about cards like Deadeye Navigator, which till this day I'm always going to come to its defense because there are so many cards that are just ridiculous, inherently busted. This card flickers stuff for 2 mana, which is very good, extremely cheap, but is it really the bane of this format? I think not. If we were to look at the ban before Leovold, the year before, I believe it was around this time, January 2016, when they decided to ban Prophet of Crucifix. And a lot of people had mixed opinions about that, but at least people understood it took over games and it served a very similar purpose to Leovold: dominate your opponents and annoy the heck out of them. Because all you did was wait till your opponent's turns, because your land's on tap during their untap steps as well. So you would be able to play your creature spells. If you had any sort of draw engine, you could keep your turns going on their turns, and games could be delayed for however long you want to go, making their turns, making their actions incredibly irrelevant, while at the same time keeping up mana to counter whatever their answers could be, whatever creatures they want to attack with, flash into play better creatures. Either way, Prophet of Crucifix Leovold, incredibly busted in the format. And most people, the general consensus seems to be that those cards deserve to be banned, and not a lot of people are sympathetic for those who enjoy them, although I can understand why you would. Overall, it comes down to what Wizards of the Coast is willing to do with brand new sets, what they're willing to do for the new players that are coming into this game just for Commander. Because we have to look at Commander now. We cannot depend on Standard being this pinnacle of Magic the Gathering. When you first come and play the game for the first time, Standard has always been sort of this presence. It's sort of been the most competitive, the forefront, what we expect out of the experience. You get to play with the newest cards, and it's usually a 2-year period of relevancy, and then those cards become obsolete to the format, which has made things a bit interesting. You have to experiment with new cards. The premise for the entire format is based around planned obsolescence. It's not just a bad thing, but a lot of people like it because it makes you do things you don't feel comfortable with. You have to experiment with a new set. You have to say goodbye to older cards and open your mind to all the new possibilities, which, to me at least, was the main appeal for Standard. But when you decide to ban certain cards because they're just too oppressive, because they're just too powerful for the format, you start to make people a little bit nervous. In a very similar way to the card game Yu-Gi-Oh! Bannings have been interpreted as a financial decision rather than one that is healthy for the card game itself. I don't want to see Wizards of the Coast make the same mistake. Many people come and play this game specifically to leave that other card game. So if Wizards of the Coast is unable to heal Standard, return to the good days of, say, Return to Ravnica, a more healthier time for the format, or even Theros Standard, something that wasn't completely broken, those decks seem to be healthy. You didn't really see a lot of complaints. There might have been a dominant deck in the format, but there was always something that could compete. Commander doesn't really have this issue. There's no one deck that's going to ruin it. You have a category of decks that are very dominant in the format, such as Combo, Control, Storm, but it never really seems to ruin playgroups because the playgroup has the power in this format. It's not a competitive format. If you're playing with 3 of your friends that you know very well, you could just say, hey, everybody, let's play with our average decks. Let's play with our fun decks. Let's not play with our super competitive control decks, our mono blue decks, our blue white decks. Let's have fun with a hyper-competitive deck that might not play the most expensive cards you could possibly put in a Commander deck, but it's still going to give you the most valuable experience of just enjoyment. If you can't enjoy it, why are you even bothering? So anyway, I hope that if you are currently fleeing from Standard and you have not given it a thought yet, please just consider next time you're at your local game store, look at one of those precons, see what it can offer you. Ask your friends what they like about the format. You never know, you might be surprised. You might find that you should have gone and started it a long time ago. But anyway, that's just food for thought. Void here signing off. You guys have a wonderful day.